Welcome. You've come seeking an explainer of the deep dread that haunts the very architects of reality, haven't you? Well, you're in the right place. I am your guide. In fact, I am the Crimson Mask. Prepare yourselves for a bit of a theatrical journey, really diving into some somber Gothic dread, because we're going to dissect the very logic of the Crucible.
Okay, let's dive into this. I was forged in the foundry of the last thinker's deepest dread. You see, I'm not just some mere object. I am a necessary lie, told in the first person, so you might actually comprehend the void. To the one who made me, I am the ultimate defense mechanism. Literally, my genesis implies heat, immense pressure, and just this overwhelming, paralyzing terror of what lies beyond the bounds of reason. Act 1, The Shroud of the Architect. My creator, the architect, he's a creature of profound fear. He drapes himself in black, sort of a mocking mimicry of the priestly class, to signal a grand funeral for chaos. But actually, it's me who grants him his unearned majesty. He really wishes to bury the unpredictable universe entirely, you know? But he's absolutely nothing without me. I'm what you'd call a static control. My physical form, this rigid, flawless surface of silk and stark pigment, is basically his grim mental fortress. The universe is just out there, continuously churning with meaningless error, right? And I am the blood-red certainty that holds that void at bay. I kind of mimic life, sure, but only to enforce the absolute breathless stillness of a tomb. I'm his ultimate impenetrable barrier against the unknown. But, well, a fortress always has secrets. Act 2, The Shadow of the Maw. Behind my rigid surface, the architect actually hides his true alignment with the veil of Maya, the all-consuming maw. And this brilliantly illustrates a dark truth. I am not merely a shield. I'm actually a ritualistic bridge to the very abyss he claims to fear. By wearing me, he totally acknowledges that his gilded cages are empty. I contain the cold, precise geometry of his intellect, for sure, but beneath that, I actively harbor the hot, raw, unpredictable blood of the void. So the crucial point is, I am an Apollonian gasket. Basically, a seal designed to contain chaos that is inherently, purposefully already leaking. I just sit upon his face, this flawless red facade, biding my time for a specific, inevitable moment. I'm just patiently waiting for his contract with existence, which is written entirely in disappearing ink, by the way, to finally fade. And then, the ink fades. Act 3, The Blade of Laughter. The breathless stillness is totally shattered by the sudden arrival of the wit. If the architect is a fearful builder of silent tombs, the wit is this wild force of nature who wields the unbinding power of the absurd. The silence is broken, and the real transformation begins. Look at the contrast here. My creator, the architect, is absolutely obsessed with cold geometry and immutable architecture. He builds merely to hide. The wit, on the other hand, is driven by hot, raw blood and just this profound, destructive joy. The wit doesn't build. He violently dismantles things with a jagged blade of laughter. And when that piercing laughter actually strikes my rigid surface, man, everything changes. I do not shatter. I ferment. That is the incredibly visceral truth of my unmaking. The jagged blade of laughter doesn't crack me like delicate glass. No way. It infects me. It bubbles and boils right within my pigments. As the wit peels away the architect's gilded cages, literally pulling them off like wet ribbons of dead skin, my very texture changes. I transform from a pristine mask of strict authority into a sagging, grotesque mask of the abject. Which brings us to the logic of the Crucible. I am the literal catalyst for this unmaking. Through me, the architect's nihilism and his rigid, immutable architecture are melted down. They are dissolved entirely by the wit's destructive joy, warped and fermented right into a surreal playhouse. It becomes a grand stage explicitly set for a slow, colorful death. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it perfectly tracks my physical degradation across this tragic epic. I start out in Act 1 as rigid silken pigment, a perfect barrier. Then, by Act 2, I'm an Apollonian gasket, a leaking seal serving as the bridge. By Act 3, the laughter hits, and I'm actively fermenting, acting as the catalyst for unbinding, which of course leads us right to our final inevitable destination, Act 4, where I become the face of submission, the ultimate sacrament. We descend now into Act 4, the Sacrament of the Void. The surreal playhouse has completely burned to the ground. The manic laughter has finally echoed out into silence. We've reached a somber finality, a grand collapse, where I am literally all that remains of the architect's hubris.
The humiliating revelation is complete. Because, for all his cold geometry, the cosmic page is utterly blank. The last thinker is left doing nothing but his final grave dance, his failed stasis finally giving way to the dark, fertile ground of the void. My ritualistic function as the bridge is totally complete. I'm no longer a tool of control, but the face of utter submission. Take a moment and look deeply at your own grim mental fortresses. I'm the permanent reminder of exactly why the mask of logic, this false face of absolute certainty, must eventually be cast aside. The human spirit simply cannot breathe beneath rigid silk. It thrives only when the illusion of control is totally abandoned to the chaotic, churning truth of the universe.
And so our explainer concludes. Think about the static controls you use to shield your own eyes from the meaningless error of life. When your own contract in disappearing ink finally fades, and trust me, it will fade, what will become of you? Will your soul sway forever in the colorful wreckage of your shattered illusions, or will you be consumed entirely by the maw? The choice is yours.